right, joining me now to break down some best bets for NFL Week 2 action and some of the biggest storylines of the weekend to not discuss my prediction that the Dolphins would cover the spread in Week 1 against the Colts is our guy, John Middlekauff. John, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've accepted the reality that this Miami Dolphins team is broken. I did go into the season with some modest optimism, but that was the response to getting dragged all off season and getting called soft. Have you ever seen a team so underprepared for a Week 1 game?
Well, I think we knew. I mean, the teams they were practicing against in the joint practices, I think it was one of the guys in the Lions had a comment like, "Yeah, not quite sure what's going on over there." Like, I don't know. That was a pretty bad sign. Listen, I mean, you can't fake being a tough guy. And Mike, when he was hired for his schematic creativity, but he is not someone that walks in a room like he's Andy Reid, Sean Payton, the Harbaugh brothers, the Tomlin, and commands it. Let's face it, he just doesn't. And you can get away with that. Like, no one's acting like Kyle Shanahan is Mr. Rah-Rah guy in front of the room like Sean McVay, but you better know what you're talking about. And you better have, hold people accountable. And clearly this thing is too late now. I don't really know what you do. I mean, this notion, and we'll talk to Tyreek, this is not like he doesn't have as much value. He feels like an old NBA player, that by name is really, really famous and people have been playing on video games and people have his jerseys, but it's like he's actually not worth as much as you think when you factor in that he makes a lot of money. And let's face it, has some issues off the field that in this day and age, I mean, teams like, what's the point? Unless I can get for free. Can I get you for a 7th rounder and you eat half the money? Well, okay.
Yeah, some domestic stuff came out yesterday. I'm sure the Dolphins were
like, there's
great.
a long line of that, of just like he's not
flags.
the most dependable guy. Say what you want about Jalen Ramsey, like he's fit in with the Rams and he looks like he's fitting in with the Steelers. He's fit in winning cultures.
Okay, let's talk about some things that actually matter. Let's start with what we saw on Monday Night Football. Crazy how that game just flipped. The first drive of the game for the Bears, I'm thinking I've seen enough. Caleb Williams is not a bust. This is going to work out with Ben Johnson in Chicago. For the Vikings, I'm thinking early in the game, should they be calling the Falcons to try to maybe get Kirk Cousins back in the building? Those were not my opinions at the end of the game. So what was your assessment of both quarterbacks and the overall result of the game?
Yeah, one thing I've learned doing this long as I have is, and I made the mistake last night, is writing the headline to your start of your podcast the moment you live react when the game ends in the first half. That can get you in trouble. So Obviously it was a tale of two halves. I thought early in the game, I know Caleb's numbers look really good. I think at one point he was 9-9 or 10-10. A lot of dinking and dunking. Like, no one's ever argued that Caleb, honestly, he's a better athlete than even I realized. Like, he is a really good scramble, young Russell Wilson run around, and his arm is so powerful. But he's not very good within the pocket. And there were times last night, it's hard because on the TV copy, you can't see who's open down the field, but he was not letting it rip. He was like, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to get my coach mad at me. So he was just dumping it off, which is positive. What John Gruden used to say, you can never go broke taking a profit. So obviously you move down the field. But part of getting Caleb Williams, you got DJ Moore, which was a huge part of the trade that got them the number 1 overall pick. Because remember, they could have got 3 first-rounders, but they said instead of 3 first-rounders, we will take DJ Moore. And, his usage late in the game, he was missed wide open. And you draft Rome Odunze 9th overall. When you take a guy that high, you're expecting fireworks as a player. And to me, it just does not work. We know Justin Jefferson's one of the best non-quarterbacks in the NFL. And I went, we've seen Malik Neighbors freaking out. We've just seen wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, guys get mad and frustrated. There was a shot with just Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson talking. I'm like, you know what? This is a pretty high-level dude. He's not freaking out. And obviously, JJ turned the corner. But JJ, I didn't believe. Like, I just bet against, like, the likelihood, this guy, this program. But as everyone that gets his back says, mentally tough. This guy's a war daddy. This guy can play crappy in games he did in college, and he flips it. He's just sometimes the word, the use of, like, he's a winner. It's like, well, yeah, a lot of people win in college when you play at Georgia, when you play at Michigan, when you play at Ohio State. It doesn't always – Tim Tebow was a winner. But his skill set Like in the pocket, he's got a big arm. He's obviously a good athlete. He's much more natural, I thought, just based on one game last night in the pocket. That's Caleb's 18th start. This is the guy. Honestly, the first half felt a little Arch Manning, like on the road, tough environment. You're like, listen, I'm not going to write the kid off, but this is pretty scary. And then by the end, you're like, that looked like Sam Darnold or something, right, from last year.
Yeah, he looked shook, but he did show amazing resilience. So that was pretty cool to see. Vikings fans have got to be absolutely pumped up about that. Okay, let's discuss what we saw on Sunday night. No exaggeration, one of the best regular season games of all time. I was all set to put the Ravens in a tier of their very own at the top
Same.
of the NFL. But of course, they choked it away. And I think that's a loss that could have lasting impact when you talk about playoff seeding. That number one seed in the AFC is going to be massive this year. Who's to blame for the loss for Baltimore?
That's a great question. I mean, the one thing that really stood out in my mind as that game was playing out, and I know the Bills won that playoff game, but you kept telling yourself, if this was baseball or basketball, a 7-game series, the Bills would have no shot. But that's not the sport of football. It's a 1-game situation. Now, the best teams like the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, they play each other twice because they always play each other in the regular season. But the Bills aren't as good as the Ravens. But it doesn't matter. The point of this whole thing is to win the game. And listen, John Harbaugh a couple years ago, even more than a couple years ago, started going for it all the time, going for two. Tomlin did as well. And it's like this is like his new style. And then in that game, they punt to a guy. Remember Belichick once took a lot of crap, probably 20 plus years ago, when he went for it with Kevin Falk and he dropped the pass or he got stuffed. I can't remember the exact play, but Peyton Manning then got the ball back and scored immediately. And his whole thing was, we hadn't been stopping him. I wasn't going to punt the ball back to Peyton Manning. It does feel like that with Josh Allen in that given game, where I do think the Ravens against most teams would have won that game by 30 points. But Josh Allen has become like, one thing I wrote down is, you know how the Denver Nuggets last year, I don't know how good they are, but they got this one guy on any given game can beat anybody because Jokic is unstoppable. Yeah. That's how Josh feels a little bit. You know, the Ravens, Lamar is an exceptional player, but their entire team is good. Their defense is good. I mean, their DBs gave them some plays as the game went on, but their defense is excellent. Derrick Henry is in the peak of his power somehow at 31 years old. How good is Zay Flowers? Likely will come back. They got Andrews. They got really good players everywhere. And I'm watching this Keon Coleman. Cook's a good running back. But their defense, the one thing that stands out when the Bills play the Ravens is, I'm not the biggest fight guy, but I do appreciate there's weight classes for a reason. You don't make a guy that weighs 170 pounds fight a heavyweight. And it does feel, even though the 170-pound might be Floyd Mayweather or Conor McGregor or whatever, the Bills are clearly an elite team, but they feel small on defense. And it shows up against the Ravens, but, Josh bailed them out. The fumble, I mean, they needed help.
Yeah, when you have a quarterback that good, you're able to overcome things like a spotty defense and maybe, the coaching at times, a little questionable. Okay, let's talk about
Are those the best two players in the league? Josh.
Oh my God, man. They're just automatic video game mode, these guys.
Yeah,
it was such it's rare. I'm sitting watching the game by myself, just laughing out loud about what the guys are doing. It was absolutely unbelievable. A beautiful display of the sport of football on Sunday night. Okay, let me ask you about the other big time team in the AFC. Of course, it is the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think a big theme for them this season is going to be people complaining about Patrick Mahomes doesn't have enough help. And I think that's a fair complaint. So how concerned should their team be about that lack of help and the team just going forward here into what could be a difficult season?
Well, they looked exactly like they looked the last 2 years. And those two teams, one won a Super Bowl and the other got to a Super Bowl. They have invested in the offense, right? They drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round. Like Ricky Pearsall's making a bunch of plays for the 49ers. They gave him used a first-round pick on him. So when you use a first-round pick at the or early second round, like Keon Coleman, the standard is pretty high. You don't need to be Justin Jefferson, but we expect you to be a very productive player. He gets hurt the third play of the game. Rashee Rice, who looked like I'm going to become a 70, 80, 90 catch, high-end player, last year gets injured, and then this year is suspended because of he was a moron in the Lamborghini. So it's like they have two assets that they invested, a second-round pick and a first-round pick, that as that game after the first series are nowhere to be found. One self-inflicted and the other kind of a freak just injury. So, like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. If I take the top 2 receivers off most teams in that situation, they're going to find themselves there. But to me, the elephant in the room, and we know this, the Chiefs know this, he knows this. Travis Kelce is nowhere near what he once was, which is understandable. He's in his mid-30s, been playing the league for almost 15 years, but his style is very predicated, at least in his heyday, speed, explosion, like one of the best athletes we've ever seen at the position. Like, Shannon Sharp level, Tony Gonzalez. He's just the route running. He's uncoverable. Well, he's coverable now. So he can still make a play. He had the touchdown, but the touchdown to me is Andy Reid, right? The scheme, he like faked the block and then went. That was not Travis juking 3 guys out and making plays. You watch him, I don't think Travis, I think Mahomes is looking for him, and I don't think he's, especially in that matchup against Derwin James. Now, there are going to be some teams that don't have Derwin James that he can be more productive. But I think the days of just, and we saw this last year, looking at the box score, 9 for 140 and 2 touchdowns with Travis in these big games, they are done. And that was a moment that if Travis had been younger, could have carried him in that game and probably the Chiefs win. He cannot do that anymore. This is his last season in the NFL probably, right?
Do you think they could be desperate enough to bring back Tyreek if the Dolphins essentially almost gave him away for free?
I know a lot of people in that organization. I was around them when I went to the Super Bowl for a couple of days. I was told, again, things change, right? It's one thing. Last season, you get a little more desperate. You're in the peak of Mahomes, is 30 years old in the prime of his career. You have a good team. I was told no chance. Now, I don't know the details. Is that because of the stuff that was said? Is that just other stuff behind the scenes? I was told 100% no chance. So, like you said, if they just gave him to him, because the one thing is like Tyreek, the chemistry they had, one thing Andy told me a long time ago is Tyreek's like a football genius in the sense of like you can tell him something and come back to it like 3 weeks later and he remembers. Some players mentally is a lot going on. Part of the reason he was so great, and even with Mike in Miami those first couple of years, is because his football IQ is really, really high. I think the question mark is, now I'd be lying if I was super dialed in on the Dolphins game on Sunday morning. Is he still the same, speed-wise? Because last year his numbers dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's a lot going on in the guy's life. No one's trading anything of value. I honestly, my prediction right here, I think they would basically have to give him away. I think at this point in time, teams, especially good teams, you'd be risking team chemistry. He's made comments before about multiple quarterbacks. It's like, oh, Tua, he said the same thing about Patrick Mahomes when he left. So I think it's pretty risky. He makes a ton of money. I think it's a complicated situation.
Okay, so week 1 this season, no different from other seasons. We saw some unexpected performances, both good and bad. We saw the Lions offense struggle. The Broncos offense struggled. Meanwhile, Daniel Jones looked like Peyton Manning. The Raiders looked pretty good on the road. So which performance do you think will go down as a mirage and will get corrected either right away or as the season progresses?
Yeah, to me, the Colts, I think are they in for a little welcome back to the NFL this week, playing Denver, going for Miami. So I would pump the brakes on that one. Listen, I don't know how good the Patriots are. I thought they were going to be good. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little concerned. I think Drake May, I was expecting way more, him and the Josh McDaniels combination. But when you go on the road, when we talk about bets this weekend, going across country for West Coast teams is difficult. Like the Rams going to the Titans, you cross a bunch of time zones, you kick off really early. If you think about the Vegas team, I don't know what the weather is over the last week in Vegas. I'll promise you this, it's hot. And they go to Foxborough. I'm looking up at the TV. It's a rainstorm, or it's raining. People are in like sweatshirts. It's clearly not super warm. It's tough, cold weather. So I think anytime that you can go several time zones, even if you're playing a team that ends up with 6 or 7 wins, that's a big time win. Here's the other thing about the Raiders is like Pete Carroll is a real coach, like Hall of Fame level coach. And I'll say this, like Geno Smith, now that was the good Geno Smith. He can be a little bit of a roller coaster, but like over the last couple of years, he does give you more good than bad. So They got Max Crosby. They got Colton Miller. Brock Bowers is a stud. Jacoby Myers is like one of the more probably underrated players in the league. And again, they have a real coach now and a coaching staff. So I don't see why the Raiders, I wouldn't feel confident calling them a wild card team just because the division's really hard. And we'll see Geno against like the Chargers and the Broncos. It's a little different animal. But I'd be pretty happy and fired up that goes like we're going to be a real team for the next couple of years with Pete Carroll.
Okay, before we get into best bets, I want to talk about this Bill Belichick story. I think this Belichick experiment in college football has a potential to end in disaster. It kind of reminds me of when you have the aging fighter, whether it be a boxer or an MMA guy, and they take some time off, and now I'm going to come back for one more fight. I'm in the best shape of my life. Then they get absolutely flatlined, and it's sad. So what is this story? He's not letting Patriot scouts in the building at UNC?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience in college football, working in it, and when I scouted going in, for the most part, the experience for the scouting staffs, most people in football are fired, right? Pete Carroll's been fired. Andy Reid's been fired. People get fired. Bill Belichick went 4-12. And really the last couple years were really ugly. So him acting like the Patriots, and listen, I get it, like the documentary and having an issue with Kraft. But banning the scouts, that's not a shot at Kraft. That impacts Jonathan and Robert Kraft, zero. That impacts Vrabel, who I thought was like friends with Bill. That impacts Elliott Wolf, who Bill hired. Banning the Southeast scout has absolutely nothing to do with Robert Kraft. But I think it does show you, I was thinking about this, and because you're a fan of a team in that division. Bill hated the Jets till the day he was fired, probably still does. Obviously still does because he was talking about him last year when he was doing media stuff. It's like, Bill, that happened in like 1999. How can you – and you were under contract. How do you hold a grudge that long? But he's proven. He holds – remember the picture that all the coaches take during March or April at the owners' meetings? There's just that funny picture. Andy Reid's always in the Hawaiian shirt. It's funny. Bill was never there. Why? Because he hates the league office and he hates the league because he thinks they've been on him. So Bill has proven with his actions for a long, long time. His pettiness, we're human nature to hold a little bit of a grudge over stuff. But eventually, even when you get a bad breakup, the first year, the second year, but like 10, 20 years down the line, people move on. Bill doesn't move on. Bill holds on. Bill, you got fired a couple years ago after it was what was the game? Remember they went to London his last year there. They played like the Colts. And they lost to Gardner Minshew. It's like, Bill, it couldn't have been any uglier. You would have fired yourself, but he thinks he was wrong. So listen, I don't know, man. It's pretty unheard of, especially when his best friend, in theory, I guess, was Nick Saban. Nick Saban, it's been well reported. Everyone that went through Alabama, 365, 24/7. You could call someone at 2 a.m, at 1 p.m. You can go to team meetings. It's just wide open to the scouts. And again, these scouts aren't there to like give your information to your opponent. They're just looking at the players, and it's good for the program. But clearly he does. I think Bill, and listen, I like Mike Lombardi. Those guys view the NFL very negatively now because they both think they got blackballed. So this notion, because I put it out there on my podcast, it was on the only reason I even looked into it because on Monday night, Pete Thamel during the broadcast was like, this is what they gave the scouts. And it was like an empty 2 deep. So I started texting people. I'm like, is Bill being a pain? And they're like, yeah, this. So like those guys, people are like, I can't believe you said that. Not only did they embrace it, they are prideful and like, yeah, they're not welcome here. They're not trying to hide this story. Like the Eagles, they probably didn't want it out when they were thinking about trading for Micah because clearly they would probably had to include like Jordan Davis or something in the trade, right? So you don't like that's something you want under wraps. This is not something they're hiding from. And I don't know about you, but I don't think they're going to be. Charlotte's probably terrible. I mean, they're going to start playing some real teams in the ACC. It could be a tough year.
Well, I saw the clip at the press conference and someone asked him about it. And he said, they're not allowed. I'm not allowed in their building, so they're not allowed in mine. I laughed. It's so petty that it's actually funny and entertaining.
It was a funny line. It was a funny line. But it's like also, even Vrabel said, one, he came back for Tom's statue. So it's like you are welcome here. And most times when you're not coaching, how often does like Andy Reid go back to the Eagles building? It's like, what's he even talking about?
Okay, best bet time for week 2 of the NFL season. We got a couple of underdogs, including the game of the week. We'll end with KC and Philly. Let's start with the Tennessee Titans at home, a 5.5-point underdog. Their defense looked pretty good on Sunday, not so much their offense, but the Rams are in town, second game in a row on the road for them. And you like the home dog, Tennessee Titans.
I would say this. The Denver Broncos defensively look incredible. I mean, their team speed, I think they led the league in sacks last year. I would imagine, I would bet on them doing that again this year. Feels like all 11 guys they put on the field on defense, from the defensive linemen to their DBs, are the fastest guys on the field. So I'm going to give, and listen, Cam Ward stood in there. He took it. That was a tough matchup. Now, the Rams are good defensively too, especially up front. But getting this many points at home, I said this to you last week. I've been telling everyone this. I think the Titans aren't bad. Now, I think you go on the road 2 Mile High with a rookie quarterback. That's a pretty tough starting spot. You get the Rams, who get a big win, and this is what we talk about. West Coast teams flying across the country. It's a 4-hour flight, bunch of different time zones. That 10 a.m. kick, it's weird on the body. I could see, I'm not acting like the Titans money line here, though I don't hate it. It wouldn't shock me if there's like a tie game headed into the fourth quarter. So I definitely like the Titans getting 5.5 points.
Okay, this next one probably won't take a whole lot of convincing. You're taking the New England Patriots. They're an underdog against the Dolphins, plus 1.5. Now, I went into that week 1 game thinking if there was ever a game for the Dolphins to get up for, it is this week 1 game after being called soft, after getting dragged all off season. Do not fall into that trap of making using that logic again. You like the Patriots to get her going. And Vrabel has always owned the Dolphins too. So why do you like the Patriots?
Well, I think a couple spots for guys like motivating coaches that had embarrassing opening weekends. I think the Bears going to Detroit, that's a tough spot. You got Dan Campbell, motivator. They got embarrassed. The Patriots, I thought, got embarrassed by the Raiders. And listen, like Miami, we're not only writing them off, like they've proven they have no fight. They quit on their coach. Their team just isn't that talented. So I just think, honestly, I was a little surprised when I was going through the slate of games. Like, are you surprised? I guess the Patriots look bad that they're an underdog in this game. Like, I would have thought pick them, maybe even the Patriots -1. I get, historically, you said Vrabel, the Patriots have usually, even during the Brady Belichick, lost a game to Miami. But it's such a different team, such a different era. I was shocked by the number. And I think a lot of it has to do with the Patriots looked really bad the second half. Like it was a rough game for them.
Yeah, I certainly won't be backing the Dolphins. I do understand people want to use the logic of September home game for the Dolphins. That is one of the better home field advantages traditionally, early in the season with the heat.
It's hot, humid there, right?
But yeah, it could be an ugly game either way. This one, not an ugly game on paper, at least. A lot of great storylines. It is the game of the week. It is a Super Bowl rematch. The Kansas City Chiefs are an underdog of a single point with the Eagles in town. So it's been close to 3 years since Kansas City has been a home underdog. You'd have to go back to October 22nd, 2022. They lost 24-22 Buffalo as a 2.5-point dog. You like them to cover the spread here and probably win the game, obviously, as a single point underdog.
I just think Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes getting points at home, auto take. I think you just have to. It's almost like Mike Tomlin at home underdog. You just take. And this you even feel with more conviction. Now, when you factor in both these two teams get longer rest because they play Thursday and Friday. I've never been to Brazil, but I know it's not close. So that travel, like the Eagles played at home. So a lot easier on their bodies than the Chiefs losing that game, getting on a plane, long flight home, kind of licking their wounds. I saw a headline yesterday. Now, I guess we'll find out more when Andy talks Wednesday, that Worthy is day-to-day. So it's not like he broke his clavicle or, dislocated his shoulder bad enough where he's out for a long period of time. I do think there's a chance that he plays. And we'll also get more information. I would imagine if he was going to get suspended, Jalen Carter, we would know now. And I definitely think that if the Dak element saved him and clearly, started with him, though you can't spit on the guy. But to me, if Dak would have done nothing and he just would have gone up and spit on him, I think Jalen would be gone this game. I think he would 100% get suspended. Yeah. So, opening night. But I think the Chiefs, here's the other thing with the Chiefs. They have become a defensive team the last couple of years, right? Their offense is not great to watch. A lot of games, Mahomes is struggling to throw for 200 yards. They're not this explosive Kelsey, Tyreek Hill offense, but their defense has been really good. They got shredded in that game. Herbert, obviously, Allen and Lamar, had incredible games. He was right there. I mean, his game, his dominance, throwing at every level, running around. He looked, people argue there's a big four and then there's who else? The way he played, there's a big five, because that's an elite quarterback that's right there with Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar. So maybe that won't age as bad if he just keeps shredding like they play the Raiders. What if he throws another 3 or 4 touchdowns in that game? So I would expect to see a pretty motivated. I'm big on week 2, especially with good coaches. Dan Campbell, the Lions. I don't know. They're going to come back to earth a little bit this year, but they're not that bad. So they're going to come out with their hair on. The Bears, that's a tough spot. The Eagles, at the end of the day, this game, big picture, doesn't really do that much, win or lose. The Chiefs, you can't start 0-2, right, in the AFC. You start, especially in that division, which is pretty good. You start kind of digging yourself a hole. Say what you want about the Chiefs, even when it's been weird. They usually start pretty fast. It's rare you look up. It's the Chiefs 3-3. That's not usually the way it works.
Okay, John. Great spot this week. We will leave it at that. Enjoy all the games this weekend. Best of luck with all your bets, and we'll look forward to catching up with you ahead of week 3.
See you later.